did you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today I'm going to be giving you the update to the Easy Sorc, or to some the Easy Mode Sorcerer. Now this is for the Dragon Bones DLC specifically, since it's just out, and of course there are some changes. Nothing too drastic, but some. I know a lot of you have heard or perhaps read the forums recently about some of the combat changes, and a lot assumed that this build would be dead, but it is far from it. In fact, it's in a very, very good place. Off balance as a whole has been altered quite a bit to balance combat, if you like, across the board, and all types of DPS were affected. Most Magicka were using 75 points in Thermaturge to get the extra damage, the 10% extra, if something's off balance, and everyone actually benefits from 70% increase to your heavy attack damage. Everybody, not just the Easy Sorc, everybody. That's still a thing. But of course, now you can only get a maximum of 25% uptime on off balance. However, that's still fine, and I'm going to show you why in this video. Just remember that, of course, with everybody having their damage reduced, because you can't have 100% uptime on that, it doesn't just mean that this build got a little bit of a reduction, but everyone did. However, you can now take advantage of off balance in certain situations to benefit you even more than it did before. One example is if you do heavy attack during off balance, not only do you get the 70% increase to your heavy attack damage, but you also receive double resources back. So that's very, very important, and you can use that to kind of balance your sustain, making some setups a little more spammy and some focusing just when that is off balance on getting sustain back. Others, however, can still use the heavy attacks just as they did before and just get that little bit extra back. So perhaps you use a couple of extra shields if you need to. You can still buff yourself, all that kind of stuff. However, let's get to the point, and that is where this build is going to start off, and that's at the stats. So first of all, buff up quickly. Potion, not that we need to. Have we got any potions? Nope, don't need them anyway, whatever. Okay, 43.3k Magicka, 868 recovery, which is not that essential because we recover really high anyway because of our heavy attacks. 16.8k in our health, which is fine because we use a lot of damage shields, and we can sustain it as well because our sustain is so high, we can use more shields than most. 2.8k spell damage, 60.2% crit chance, 64 points into Magicka, using the Thief, Munderstone, and Stage 4 Vampire. Now, food-wise, we're using max health, max Magicka. I know a lot of people like to use Witch Mothers, which lessens your health and gives you a little less Magicka, although it does give you some anyway, and also improves, above all, your recovery. We do not need that recovery. We use a lot of heavy attacks, just like we did before. The rotation's slightly altered, but we do not need the extra recovery. So we will use the highest flat stat we can get. Max health, max Magicka. If anyone else tells you any different for this particular build, they are clearly doing it wrong, because you should not be running out of juice. Now, let's go into the skills, and we'll mix that in with the gear as well at some point so we can make sense of this, because a lot of the stuff is hidden. For example, if you look at this, it's almost 3k spell damage. It looks a little bit lower than it should for most setups. However, if we self-buff and proc the glyph, we're sitting on 3.3. There's a lot more spell damage to our abilities on this setup, hidden within the sets that do not show on our stats, and we'll get to that. So first of all, we're going to go into the skills. Inner Light, this is from the Mage's Guild skill line. This is on purely for the passives above all, but first ability you unlock, I believe, Mage's Guild 2, and you basically morph this into Inner Light, and it will give you 5% additional max Magicka while on your bar. Also, it will give you an increased amount of crit, 10% in fact. Major prophecy for being on your bar also. So we keep this on the front bar at all times because this is where we do all of our damage. So we want that crit, we want that extra Magicka. So make sure you get that as soon as possible. Just a couple of lore books and you'll have that done. Shock Clench, this is Destruction Staff skill, and this is in Destra Stuff, we can find it. This is actually the third ability you unlock. You can start with Crush and Shock if you want, and in fact that is a choice to switch out for on some fights, especially for interruption, but we'll get to that in a second. Basically what this does is it fires a straight direct damage hit on the target, which also splashes nearby targets as well, the initial hit, but above all, of course, it can apply concussion, which we will get to, but it's a damage over time effect. It stays on the target till it runs out. You got 10-second dot there. Make sure you morph it to Clench, because that is the one we are using, although, like I said, you can switch to Crush and Shock if you want. This, by the way, like I said, is situational. It's got really long range on it. It's just a single hit, no extra dot or anything like that. But it's a free interrupt at the same time. So if anything needs interrupting to stop it from casting, you can use this and it will do it straight away. You don't have to run up and bash it, just hit it. And that particular skill, Crush and Shock, which like I said is your flex slot, is the first ability you unlock. So if it's Force Shock, you can turn it into Crush and Shock. Hardened Ward, this is in our Daedric Summoning skill line. Takes a while to get to this, because this is the 4th ability you unlock. You unlock it as a damage shield to start with, but you morph it into Hardened Ward because it's a stronger damage shield of the 2. It's very, very powerful, and it's stronger once you've activated it. So it's say 15k there, but in actual fact, you turn it on. Oh, try again. 20.7. Bloody huge. Don't need to really buff into Bastion and all that kind of stuff for this, because this already coats more than what your health has got. Your health is 16.8, your damage shield is 20. Now, next one, Bound Agates. Oh, by the way, while you get into this stage, this is for leveling up, by the way. Daedric Summoning. All these abilities here, obviously, we're not using them at all. You can use a pet if you want, but you don't have to. While leveling, get the pet, morph it into the Clan Fear. So here's an example for you. Most people tend to use this one for damage, but if you morph it into the Clan Fear, you can use this while leveling to heal. If you activate the ability or the pet while it's on your bar, while you have the pet out even, it will give you a heal equivalent to 35% of your max health. That I use while leveling, 1 to put on the bar to level up the skill line, so I can unlock this eventually, and 2 because you don't have Power Surge to start with, which I'll get to. It's very, very important for you to survive with that ability. If you don't have it, turn that into Clan Fear to start with, and you can heal while leveling up. But that's for the lower level guys. If you're already this far in, you can already access this anyway. Not Storm Calling, Daedric Summoning again. Bound Aegis, this gives you minor resists to minor resolve and minor ward, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 1320. There are other buffs out there that are normally given by your group that do give you this resist bonus, but you've got it yourself all the time anyway. However, above all, this does give you 8% max Magicka for having it on your bar. Now, this does have to be double barred, otherwise it will fall off. You don't have to keep casting it, just turn it on and it will stay on. For example, there you go. Now I swap bars, it will stay. It doesn't have a buff timer, it stays on forever, even when you change locations. And for anyone that was curious, because I do get this question a lot, the glowy eyes, it's that ability. Turn it on again. There you go, glowing eyes. Awesome. Anyway, this does stack with this. So you have 5% max Magicka here, 8% max Magicka here, and this is in also, same as the shield, it's in the Daedric Summoning skill line. Last one to unlock. It is a bit of a pain in the ass to get to because it takes a very long time. So while you're leveling, again, if you're new to this, put as many Daedric Summoning abilities on your bar as possible while leveling up, and it will make it a lot faster to get to here. I believe you have to be level 42 in Daedric Summoning to unlock it. Could be wrong there. I'm pretty sure it's 42. Or it might be 38. We'll go with 42 anyway, because you're going to want it. But anyway, unlock that as soon as possible. Your main execute here is Mage's Wrath. Now this comes from the Storm Calling abilities, or the skill line. It's the first one you unlock. Morph it to Mage's Wrath. The other one does give you Magicka back if something dies. However, this one has additional splash damage. And how this works is when the enemy is below 20% health, you fire this off. It does an additional amount of damage. Quite a lot of damage, in fact. And it's shock damage. That's very, very important. Shock damage is key to this setup. Now, something to note. If you look at the buff timer on the skeleton, or the debuff, you can see, not the blue with the splashes, the one that looks exactly the same as the skill, that one there. It's got a countdown on it. Now what that is it attaches itself to the target, does damage. If that is still active by the time the target reaches 20% or lower, it will pop. So this will do instant damage and pop if they're lower than 20%, but if you put it on before they're 20% and burn them down to it, it will go off like a bomb. But anyway, that's your main spammable for your execute. Again, that is in Storm Calling. So first one you unlock. Negate Bubble, you don't have to have this. You can use any of the Sorcerer ultimates, but above all, have a Sorcerer ultimate in your front bar ultimate slot. Now, the reason I choose Suppression Field personally is because it's absolutely insane. It can pin down an entire room of enemies. Have we got enough ulti? Let's do this. Nearly. Pin down an entire room of enemies as long as they are not immune to CC and all the rest of it. And it does damage every half a second. So it ticks just like volley if you're on a stamina. It's really, really nice, but it does this. Things can't cast, they can't move, they can't do anything. Plus you do a decent amount of damage as well. Now the reason this is on your bar is because of the passives in the Sorcerer skill line. It's from Dark Magic, by the way. The level 12 ultimate, I think you get it. But above all, this is for your damage. Your spell damage is what drastically affects your light and heavy attacks, and you get an additional 2% for this being on your bar. We'll get to that in the passives, but above all, have a sorcerer ultimate in this slot. Doesn't matter if it's the pet, the Storm Atronach, in fact, the negate bubble, or overload, doesn't matter. But I preference negate bubble because it's a really good utility skill. And especially if you haven't got enough to fire off the back bar ultimate, which I'm going to get to in a second. That one does cost a lot more. It is a lot stronger as flat DPS is concerned. However, this for situations, or oh shit button if you like, is really, really, really strong. A lot of people will tell you it's not. That just means they haven't used it before and don't know how to use it properly. It's very, very powerful. Now, the back bar. Bound Aegis again, like I said on the front, we have to double bar it. So I'll put it here. I haven't double barred Inner Light because one, I don't have room for it on the bar, and two, when I get to the rotation, you'll see that we're barely on the back bar to benefit from it, so it's absolutely fine to not have it. However, you can switch out if you want to, and I'm going to show you where that can go in a second. Blockade of Storms. This is Elemental Blockade. It's what it's morphed into. Second ability down in the Destro skill line. Really, really, really powerful. Bread and butter of your overall DPS for this particular setup. You must have this under the target at all times while you're doing your rotations, otherwise you are going to struggle with your damage full stop. This is very, very important. Not only that, we're using a lightning staff, of course, which means it has additional effects. The additional effect for this is Blockade of Storms sets concussed enemies off balance. So let's see if we can concuss him. Concuss is like a blue debuff with kind of a flash effect in the middle of it. Let's see if we can get it to proc, because this one's quite strong with it. That one there, see that? That light blue one, when that's active, let's try and proc it again. Lightning damage does that. Wall of Elements, off balance instantly. Now the off balance is the dark blue one right there. Now that guy standing there, that's a cooldown, so just pay attention to that. That's how often he can and can't be knocked off balance. When that's available, you can't do it. But as you can see, as soon as something is concussed, he can still be concussed while he's doing this. Come on, fire. It's not gonna work now. Come on. Let me down. There you go. Off balance instantly, without fail. So it's very, very important. Now, where are we? Destro. Boundless Storms. Boundless Storms is also very, very important. This is in Daedric. Nope. Storm Calling. Second ability you unlock. Morph it eventually once you level it up to Boundless Storms. Now this will do damage once a second in area of effect or anything close enough to you. Shock damage again. It's all lightning or shock damage. Gives you major resist buff, major resolve, major ward, giving you physical and spell resistance, and it will also make you run faster for a short period of time. Now this, in conjunction with our next ability, is very, very important. It makes you run faster, as you can see, but standing next to stuff, you do damage. And it can crit. It will crit. If you're fully buffed and all the rest of it, that can do quite a considerable amount. As you can just see, it knocked the target concussed as well, which is quite nice. But this works very, very well alongside this. Power Surge. This is also in Storm Calling. This is the fourth ability you unlock. You want to morph it to Power Surge, not Crit Surge. Crit Surge if you're a Stamina Sorcerer, Power Surge if you're a Magicka Sorcerer. Now what this does, this gives you major Brutality, which isn't really important to us, but above all, Major Sorcery, which is important to us. We get both buffs, but we want to take advantage of Major Sorcery, because that increases our spell damage by 20%, which will increase our overall damage as well. But this has a very, very important bonus to it, and this is while you do critical damage, or any crit damage that you do, once a second, that will heal you for 2.5k. Why is that important to Boundless? If you're close to an enemy, and sometimes you will be, in fact a lot of the time you will be, there'll be ads flying around everywhere, you get stuck in. While this is running, every tick, see that crit? That crit again, and again. Every 1 second that this can tick, this can heal you. Just like every other ability that goes down can heal you as well. So collectively, one of them is going to crit and you are guaranteed to heal. So if you're in trouble and you put damage on that target over there and just get out of the way, you are going to heal. Those two skills combined are very, very important, especially if you're here, like this. And you will be. You'll get stuck, you'll get knocked down, you'll have a shield up perhaps. You can still heal underneath that. Mix those two together. Now, if you don't want to put that ability on because for whatever reason you decide you don't like it, it's very, very powerful, by the way. You can switch this to Inner Light if you prefer and just leave that as a passive bonus on your bar, just like the front one. But we're not on the back bar long enough, so you really don't need to. That's your choice, however. Liquid Lightning. This is really, really essential as well. This is your other ground AoE. So Wall of Elements must be on floor, and so must this. This is in Storm Calling again. Third ability you unlock, morph it to liquid lightning, and this will do damage once a second for 10 seconds. Very, very strong. However, there is a synergy ability attached to it, so other people can just pick that up and do a burst of lightning damage as well. But this one lasts 10 seconds, whereas Blockade of Storms lasts 8. The reason we put one down before the other is because we take advantage of the duration of one over the other. This one lasts longer, so this one goes down first. This one goes down second. By the time this is run out, this is ready to reapply again. And that's basically inside the rotation, which I will get to. But you have one down, you buff up, fire the other one, and then you carry on. Now, they'll both run out roughly the same time, but usually just as this one's about to pop, you put another one down. As the other's popping, put another one down. You see they overlap on top of each other and never run out. Sometimes they will, but don't panic if they do, but that's basically why they're lined up that way. Again, that's in the rotation part. That will come soon. Destro ulti, Destruction Staff skill line. You do need to be level 50 in Destruction Staff to get this, so make sure you've got plenty of abilities on your bar while leveling up. This is a massive, massive nuke in area of effect, which lasts 9 seconds, not 7, because we get the additional 2 seconds for being lightning. This can do all the same shiny stuff that lightning can do. It can concuss, it can knock stuff off balance if you've got wall of elements and such down. It does a stupid amount of damage. Also note, this isn't actually in any of the skill lines anywhere. Actually, it might be. Let me double check Destro in case they updated that. We'll get to those in a minute. It doesn't say. Okay, concussion. Fire off, come on. Let's have some concussion. Minor vulnerability. Anything concussed will get minor vulnerability, increasing the damage done to that target by 8%. Very important. The Destro ulti. This, let me see if I can build up some ulti. There we go. This is basically what it looks like. And this is how you do your rotation inside of it. Keep your dots up and do what you got to do. It's bloody disgusting. Very, very strong. It's a full-out nuke button, and you need to use it as soon as you've got it, especially in AoE situations. Now, how do we put this all together? We need to look at the passives first of all. This is very, very important. Make sure you get this as soon as possible. Reduces the Magicka cost and stamina cost of your abilities. Above all, obviously, Magicka, because we're using no stamina abilities at all. But get this as soon as possible. This heals you if you use a Dark Magic ability. We're not using anything other than Negate Bubble occasionally. So this isn't hugely essential. But, of course, if you want to get it just for the sake of it, or for later on, if you want to switch some skills out, go for it. Increase the duration of your Dark Magic abilities. We are using the Gate Bubble occasionally, or Suppression Field. You are going to need this to increase the duration. Of course, that means more damage and more stun time, so very, very useful. Also, casting a Dark Magic ability grants you Minor Prophecy. If you're using any Dark Magic abilities at all, 20 seconds worth of increased spell crit, like 3% or so. It's nice to have it. You're not going to use it that much, I guess, but if you want it, get it. But above all, make sure you get this one here, and make sure you get this one here. These two, depends if you've got enough skill points or not. These here, again, I won't use this one because I'm not using a pet. I don't use this one because I'm not using a pet. However, if you choose to use a pet, unlock them, get them as soon as possible. You will get increased health for having a pet on, and you'll also get Magicka back for them dying. So we'll get them now so you can see what they are, but I don't generally use them. Reduce the cost of your ultimates, which means you can use them more often. Obviously, that makes sense to get that. And this one increases your health and stamina recovery. We're a vampire, so our health recovery is a bit useless, but stamina recovery is nice because you will be blocking, you will be dodge rolling, you're going to need all that good stuff. So to recover stamina a little faster so you can use it more often, it's a really, really good passive to have. So I'd recommend getting that. And to use it, by the way, you must have a Daedric summoning ability on your bar. We actually have 2, so we're safe there. And on the back bar, we do have 1 as well. So we get it on both bars. Storm Calling, this is where everything starts to come together. We are using a lot of lightning damage, if you didn't already notice, which means we get a lot of extra perks. Now, this increases your recovery, this increases your physical and shock damage, so all your lightning damage is improved by 5%. No, there's no flame or ice or anything there, just shock damage. And also, if the target is below 15% health, you have a 6% chance to any of your shock damage to have this effect. Implosion. Basically, you will passively execute or do extra damage to the target for free. This is really, really essential, especially during low health periods of time for mass adds or for a boss as well. And all of these abilities apply to it. This one here, your lights, your heavy attacks, your destructive clench, your wall of elements, your liquid lightning, your boundless storms. This as well, like I said earlier, this is very, very important. If you're standing beside someone, whether it be PVE or PVE, and this is going off, this can, at low health, kill him. It can pop, do 15 to 20 odd K damage. You can do a lot more than that actually. depending on how you're buffed, it's very, very important. So all of your lightning damage has a chance to proc that passive explosion type damage. Very, very important. So the more lightning you have running, the more often that will happen, and the more damage you do execute. It's very, very strong indeed. Also, increases your weapon and spell damage by 2% for each sorcerer ability slotted. Now this is essential, and this is why I said put a sorcerer ability on your front bar. This is where we're doing our lights and heavies mostly, so this is where we want the increased spell damage. Spell damage increases your light and heavy attacks by a much higher ratio than max Magicka does. Same as max Magicka increases your abilities on a much higher ratio than spell damage does. You have to balance them out quite well, but the more spell damage you have, the bigger your lights and heavies. Now this is why we have this here, this also, and this, and this. You've got 4 abilities on the bar, increasing your spell damage by 8%. So very, very important to have those abilities on your bar. It's nice to have them on the back bar. We've got 1, 2, 3, but we're doing most of our damage on the front, so we want to make sure we get that extra bonus for it. Now, I know people want Meteor on the front bar. It's going to give you 2% extra max Magicka. It's not going to give you the additional spell damage, which means your major, light, and heavy attack damage, which we're using mostly, will suffer in return for a small amount of increased damage on your skills, which are just passively running rather than being spammed. So that's why we have that there. And again, like I said, any ultimate will go here. You can have Overload if you want to use that for utility or whatever. You can also put the pet as well. You can put the Atronach because that's quite nice as well. For the buff for other people because it has a major berserk synergy attached to it. But essentially just put this on the bar. It's an oh shit button, and all the time as much as possible use this ultimate. Now Destro, very simple stuff. Get every single one of these. You're going to need them all. Some are more essential than others, but eventually you're going to want them all anyway. Anything you kill with a Destro staff ability, Wall of Elements or your Destructive Clench or even your heavy attack, you'll gain 3.6 Magicka back. Very, very important. So if you kill stuff with a Destro staff ability or Destro staff itself, you will get Magicka back. This here, very important stuff. You'll notice that we're doing a lot of area of effect damage. Now, remember that is the initial hit with this is area of effect. This is area of effect. So is this, so is this, and so is the splash damage from your heavy attacks. Now, I know I didn't note about the splash damage, but that is now coming. So if we go into skills, you'll see in Trifocus, your shock heavy attack damage to nearby enemies for 132% of the damage done. And what that means is this, and I'm going to show you. Let's move Bob over there. Now I'm going to hit, they don't have to actually be that close, they can be quite far apart, but this is an example. See, I hit him and nobody else. Watch this. Now they're both being hit. So he gets hit and he gets splash damage. And if you have your Wall of Elements down, it goes even higher. It gets really high. Now this is not a very good full example, but you get to see what I'm angling at. The more enemies clustered up as possible, the more damage you do because you splash damage them. Really, really strong. And that only happens with the lightning stuff. You don't get that with a flame or anything else. Now, alongside of that, of course, is this here. All of your area of effect damage, including that splash, is increased by 8%. So like I said, with all the area of effect, this, and the splash are all lightning damage and area of effect. The single hit is an area of effect, but the splash is. Really important stuff. You also get bonuses to penetration, so you go through certain amount of resistance. In fact, 10% of the target's resistance with just your Destro spells. So your light, your heavy, your shock, and your wall. Then also you have increased status effect chances. So concussion, chilled, burn, and all those types of things. The burning and chilled is not really that important unless, of course, you're using crush and shock, which sometimes you will be. But for the rest of the setup, the most important one is concussion. Like I said, this ability, I'm going to get it to proc now. Come on. There you go, that one there. The light blue one is concussion. You want that up as much as possible so that the dark blue one can happen when that target isn't on cooldown. Which is 15 seconds, by the way. Off balance lasts 5 seconds, and it has a downtime of 15 seconds. So 25% uptime over 20 seconds. Now, major passives in here. Every single one of these will benefit you. You've got recovery, you've got reduction to cost, you've got resistance, you've got increased crit chance, by the way, not damage, chance to crit, and also spell penetration as well. These are very, very important. Make sure you get every single one of them. Medium armor you don't need, we're not using any. Heavy. We are using one piece of heavy, and these are very important passives to get. This one increases your resistance. You don't have to have this. This is a minor resist bonus, but if you want to optimize and get those tiny little bonuses in, this will be really, really helpful. Constitution is good. You do get resources back. Not a massive amount, but for the one piece of heavy armor you do have every so often, in fact 4 seconds, you will get Magicka and stamina back. Tiny amount. More useful to your stamina than anything else because your heavy attacks cover your Magicka anyway, but this is helpful nonetheless, so if you've got the spare points, go for it. This one is very important. This increases your max health for each heavy piece worn by 2%. Sounds like a small amount, but once you stack the small percentages, it really, really adds up. Definitely get this as soon as possible. If you're not too fussed about these, definitely get this one. Yes, we're a stage 4 vampire. Yes, we have 10% increased stam recovery, and yes, we also get this massive, massive bonus here for being stage 4. You can be stage 3 or higher, but I'm always a stage 4. The lower your health, the less damage you take from everything. Yes, we take more fire damage, but again, I've gone over this millions and millions of times, and people are still on the forums going, oh, don't stand in fire if you're a vampire, change your vampire, get rid of it because you're going to die. Nope, fire will kill you anyway. All fire will kill you. Most fire is a one-shot, even if you're a vampire or not. So, if they're on the ground like this, step out of it. If it's in a line aiming straight at you, move out of the way of it. And if it's a fireball, block it or dodge it. Simple. It's very, very simple. Most fire you can avoid. Anything you can't, most of the time you can put on a shield. And in Vast, by the way, if you're worried about that big fire AoE that St. Ohms fires out, there is a way around that. I have explained it in other videos. But if you are going to get caught by it, you're definitely not going to get away. Make sure you've got a free slot on your bar for Mist Form because it'll save your life. I'll go over that in another video a later time, but this is one of the strongest mitigation abilities in the game if used correctly. Most people just panic, see fire and die. This can be useful. Anyway, Vampire's a very, very, very strong skill line, and I would highly recommend that you go full stage 4 on it, and just make sure that you pay attention to the mechanics. Not using any skills in here, but I am using a passive. 9 ultimate gained every time you kill undead, Daedra, or werewolf. This is really, really important. Loads of skeletons there. Here's some damage. They all die. Each one gives me 9 ultimate back. Now I can fire off my Destro ulti. Very, very important. Note that you have to actually get the kill to benefit from it, but if you do, your ultimate's going to replenish really, really fast. And there's a lot of undead Daedra and werewolves in the game, especially in dungeons. So it's very, very important passive to get. Now, Mage's Guild 10 is not hugely essential. You don't have to have it, although I would get, I think this is 8 or 9. I believe it's 9. This is important for this. You have 5% increased max Magicka for having this on your bar plus the crit. However, for also slotting it, you do get the increased 2% recovery and 2% max Magicka. So if you've got time to get your Mage's Guild up, go for this passive here as soon as possible. The other ones are more useful if you're using Meteor, which I'm not, so it's irrelevant. But this passive here is very, very strong. It does give you the recovery, and it does give you the maximum amount. So really, really nice. Undaunted, this is essential stuff. Take a synergy, you get resources back. Very, very simple. You should be picking up synergies. You should be doing damage with those, or picking them up for a shield or whatever they do. Synergies are very, very beneficial to you and your group. You shouldn't miss out on them. Undaunted Metal, this is very important. Above all, get Undaunted 9 as soon as you can. One of the simplest ways to explain how to do that is vet dungeons do give you achievements, and each one of them contributes towards your Undaunted skill line. Now, if you go through each of the dungeons individually, on veteran difficulty, go as fast as you can, kill all the bosses, don't leave any behind, and complete it. Then move on to the next. You don't have to worry about no death runs and all the rest of it. Yes, they do give you bonus XP for Ward Your Undaunted, but they take a lot of time to get sometimes. If you just go really fast, kill everything, complete it, move on to the next, by the time you've finished all the dungeons, this will be Undaunted 9, no problem whatsoever. In fact, one of my characters on the NA server, I believe, had Undaunted 9 before he was 200 CPs. So go for those vet achievements really fast, move on to the next dungeon and carry on. Anyway, in short, each type of armor worn will give you an increased 2% towards your health, stamina, and Magicka. We're using 2 different types. We're using 6 pieces of light, so light is one type. We're using 1 type of heavy, so we're using 2 types, which is why we get the 4% here. And this also gives us the extra bonus alongside of the health bonus from the heavy armor passives. Nothing in there. This I would highly recommend for Sanctum Ophidia. Your raid leaders will tell you about that one, but that's another story. Also Purge if you wanted it for certain situations, but this is not part of the build. This is just something I would highly recommend you unlock just in case you do go in Sanctum Ophidia, because you're going to need it to get rid of the Magicka bombs. Again, your raid leader will explain that to you. High elf, yes, we are a high elf. 9% increased recovery, 10% increased max Magicka, and we have increased damage to Flame, Frost, and Shock. We get 4% additional shock damage here, 5% additional for being a sorcerer. We have a lot of shock damage, plus don't forget all of our shock damage can concuss, can knock things off balance as long as they're not on cooldown, and also when they're low health, our shock damage can execute stuff. So everything slots together to do as much shock damage as possible. Huge AoE damage, huge sustain, huge shock, explosions everywhere. Lovely job. Now, one more passive that you are going to need, medicinal use. This isn't, believe it or not, essential for this particular build. Most builds need to take full advantage of this so that the crafted potions last the full duration. Now, usually the duration is actually 45 seconds, and if you have this maxed out, your pots last for 47. That's if you're really focused on recovery and keeping uptime on buffs. Because we actually buff ourselves, Major Sorcery's there, Major Savagery, not Savagery, Major Prophecy, sorry, is already on the front bar, which is here. We don't actually need to use spell pots. And because our recovery is so high from so many heavies, we don't actually need to use potions to recover. In fact, we can just slot stamina ones so we can block more. So I would usually tell people to definitely get that passive as soon as possible. I still recommend you get it, but this isn't as important on this particular build as it is on every other. So that one is actually a choice. Now, I need to go into the gear. You've seen it before, you can see it again. Happy days for a lot of you out there. We are using the Spider Cultist 5-piece, of course. Crit, Magicka, spell damage, and 450 spell damage to your destruction staff abilities. That, by the way, before you go off at a tangent and start flipping out about us not using enough Destro abilities, this counts towards everything that we do with our destruction staff. Now, what I mean by that is our destruction ultimate. When we're on the front bar, this will do the extra damage to it. The wall of elements we fire off, this will do extra damage towards it. Destructive clench or crushing shock. And of course, above all, your light and heavy attacks are affected by that 450 additional spell damage. When I said at the beginning that we have 3.3k spell damage buffed, we actually have an additional 450 towards our lights, heavies, and destruction skills. Now, also we're using another set, 5-piece Netch. Now this is very, very similar. This has crit, magic, and spell damage again, but it gives you 400 spell damage to your shock damage abilities. Now this doesn't just mean your liquid lightning, your boundless storms, your wall of elements, your execute passives, and your destructive clench and all that shiny stuff. This also stacks with your light and heavy attacks. So you've got 400 additional spell damage to your lights and heavies here, and another 450 here. So you can see how this balances out. Everything that we use either contributes to our shock damage or pushes really high on our lights and heavies, which is why they are so high. Now just remember again with the splash damage rule, the 132% extra to splash damage, the higher your light and heavy attacks specifically, the higher your splash damage. So our area of effect damage is absolutely massive. At the very beginning of this video I mentioned that off balance was altered, so we don't have it up 100% of the time. That made it so that most DPS setups actually have less single target damage because it has less of an uptime. You don't get the additional 10% overall all the time. You don't get the additional off balance bonuses to your heavy attack because there's a 15-second cooldown every 20. That's good. Everyone balanced out. Everyone now has a reasonable or close amount of DPS regardless of what you're using as far as popular setups are concerned. However, our area of effect is huge because of the way that this is set up and because of the sets we're using. We'll get to that. I'll show you some demonstrations as we go. Anyway, Void Staff. This is very, very important. You don't have to get this particular one. Any Spider Cultist sharpened specifically, there is sharpened for a reason, will do. But the Widow's Void Staff comes from the last boss in Fungal Grotto 2. Now, you don't have to go onto Vet, and I know people struggle with it because there's a few mechanics in there that require your group to pay attention, but you can go on Normal as well, and it just has a blue version instead of purple. All you have to do then is upgrade it. So if you want to go on Normal, make sure you got 2 people at least, because there is a mechanic on one of the bosses that prevents you from soloing it. But you can go in, farm for this. Once you've got it, you're good for your front bar. Back bar is the Maelstrom Lightning Staff in charge. The reason it's charged because we want to make sure that we proc that off balance. We want to make sure that we proc that concussion to make sure we do the additional damage. Now, the reason we have this is because if you put down a wall of elements, every single thing inside that wall of elements will have you doing more damage with your lights and heavies. Now, here's an example. Weapon thing is procced. Food ran out. You can see there's 6-3 until the glyph falls off. 5-8. Where's the glyph? 6-3 with the glyph on. Now, if we put the Wall of Elements down, actually let's buff first. 6-6. Where's the glyph? There we go. 7-2. Okay, 7-2 at most with our current buffs. Put this down. Where's the glyph? You're now talking 10-7. 10. 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. You can see where the difference is. There's an extra 3k damage on top. Same applies with heavy attacks. If we do a regular heavy attack and it crits, if it crits, come on. What the hell? Crit. Okay, 5-2. Okay. Glyph on. Come on. 5-7. Now let's put the Wall of Elements down. We're looking at the orange number, by the way. Let's proc the glyph. Come on. 9.5. Now you want to see it off balance. If we can knock it off balance. We've got a cooldown above his head there. 1 second. Keep that concussion running. Go on, go off balance, I dare you. Come on! Stupid skeleton. There we go, now watch. 13-4. Now if you add a taunt to that, or actually we can put a debuff on for ourselves. If you add a debuff to that, which the tank will be supplying, because that's part of their taunt, or if someone has elemental drain or something like that, then you can see it add up even more. So let's knock him off balance and then give him some of that. 14-4, 14-1. That's completely solo. You can go a lot higher than that. In fact, I've seen it go in excess of 18 to 20k. But anyway, that's just a general example of showing how all these bonuses stack together. So your glyph, your spider cultist weapon, your Netch's Touch set, and the additional bonus for inside a light Wall of Elements. So remember, if you're not inside a Wall of Elements, even with the buff, it will not do enough damage. 6.3. 6.3 is no good. You want the 14s, you want the 15s, you want the 18s. You see where I'm going with that. And obviously the bigger that number, the more splash damage you do. Now, this doesn't have to be in any particular order, but you do need to make sure that everything is in Divines. You can trait change it or pick it up to you. And also make sure that you have spell damage glyphs on your jewelry. So, maximum spell damage on all of your jewelry. Any pieces in any order, as long as you have 5 and 5 on your front bar. In fact, this could be a Netch's staff instead of a spider staff if you wanted, as long as you have 5 pieces of this and 5 pieces of Netch on your front bar. Back bar can be one of these as well if you don't have the Maelstrom weapon, or the Maelstrom weapon if you do. Now, the shoulder is Magicka for a reason. Remember I told you that a spell damage gives you a higher ratio to damage on your lights and heavies, and they are essential to this setup. This obviously contributes quite heavily towards that. So a heavy Magicka to give us the extra health and to give us the extra spell damage. Health, by the way, is in the passive for the heavy armors, which I went over a moment ago. Now, rotation wise, this is why I said you don't need inner light on the back bar. You have 2 buffs, Boundless Storms and Power Surge. They must be up all the time. You want to keep them up. But you can't just switch to the back bar, buff, 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 buff. That's too long. It's too long. So we do dot, light attack, buff, light attack, Wall of Elements, swap bars. Now we're on the front. We do our damage on the front. When we come back to this bar again, we still put down a Liquid Lightning. We still do a light attack. We use the other buff. Then light attack, Wall of Elements, swap. So every single rotation is dot, light, buff, light, wall, swap. Next time, dot, light, other buff, light, wall, swap. So you alternate buffs every time you go to the back bar, you use a different one. Unless, of course, you're very good at keeping the up time on your own buffs. You can keep an eye on the buff timers and everything, and then you can manipulate that yourself if you want. But that's the easiest way to do it if you're starting out. Your front bar is very, very simple. Heavy attack. Oh, wrong skill. 1 second. I didn't switch it back. Come on. Now, because you've got so much sustain, you can be a little spammy with it. Heavy attack. Destructive clench. Heavy attack. Destructive clench and swap. Dot, light, buff, light, wall, swap, heavy. Destructive clench, heavy. Clench, swap again. and just repeat. So 2 heavies, 2 clenches, swap bars, buff up, swap back, 2 heavies, 2 clenches, so on and so forth. Or you can do it the old school way if you want, which is basically once you've got your wall of elements down, 3 heavies. The wall will run out, but you'll get the most uptime out of your damage on it if it's off balance, or even if it's not. Clench, swap, buff up again, and then another 3. It's up to you. You can do 3 and then 1 clench if you want, or you can do 2 with a clench each time. Your call. But 2 with 2 clenches seems to be a little bit higher as far as DPS is concerned. Single target because you're throwing out that extra hit. But it's up to you. Now, I'm going to show you a quick DPS test. Oh, one of those. It's not what they're called. They're called rotation practice. Basically, the skeleton's a dumbass, and not everything is set in stone, nor is everything actually correct. There's a lot of cheesing going on out there. There's a lot of bull. Don't believe everything you see. However, an average for Magicka DPS at the moment is roughly around the 30k mark, if you're being honest with it. Now, of course, that gets buffed a lot inside trial situations, and it depends whether it's a burst moment or a flat-out long fight. Long fights, you're talking around an average of around 30 for yourself. That's without any buffs at all. If it's a quick burst and you've got to kill it really quickly, I'll show you what we can get out of it. This is called bursting down the skeleton. There you go, 47. Not bad. Anyway, that's low health targets. Now, if you've got some builds, they can burst really, really quickly and have a really small or really large execute window. It can knock it down really, really fast and make the skeleton look good. That's exactly what I just did. Now, if you're in a big trash pool and things have got quite low health, that's something that you can do quite a lot. And while you're holding that heavy, everything else around it does equal or relevant damage, or close to that as well. So that gives you some example of what you're dealing with when you're dealing with trash. You do a lot of damage, but on average, you're looking at about 30 to 32, and that's what this gets at the moment with your own buffs. Anyway, here's a demonstration. Okay, now I'm going to get to the champion points, and these are very, very important indeed. Now, we've got 8 into spell erosion to give ourselves almost 1k penetration. Now, there is a cap on penetration, 18.2k in fact. We do have 2.7 on our sharpened weapon. We have an extra 1k here. We have almost 5k in our own light armor passives. We also have an additional to 10% of the target for our lights, heavies, and destro abilities. And of course, you have to consider that inside a group dungeon or trial situation, you're going to have buffs and debuffs applied as well. This will mean that you'll always manage to hit caps somewhere, whether it's a normal dungeon group or an optimized raid group. If you're not quite hitting it in a dungeon group, you really want to nitpick about it, you can boost this a little bit, but in most situations this is enough, and in some situations you might even want to drop it down to 1 point. But this is absolutely fine where it is. It's a good balance across the board for you and in your groups as well. We do want to crit. We want to make sure our crit is high, so we put 51 points into here. We do want to make sure, obviously, we're getting as much elemental damage as possible without diminishing any other areas of our CP trees too low. So this is absolutely fine at 13%. 37 in the Staff Expert to make sure we're taking the most, getting the most rather, out of our light and heavy attacks. We can put more into here, but just remember, if you do, you're going to lose here, and then the rest of your flat damage will go down. So if you pump too much into here, you lose a little bit of elemental, which means our skills will be lower, just for the sake of this going higher, which means they're going to balance out, if not possibly lose. So this is, so far, after weeks and weeks of testing, the most optimal I've found at the moment for this particular setup. Also, 5 points into Master at Arms. Some of our abilities, especially Destructive Clench and stuff like that, are direct damage, and we do want to buff that a little bit. Thaumaturge, important, very, very important. You can go to 81, of course, to get the next jump point, but the amount of points you spend, you could be putting points into here, you could be putting points into here. It's not worth getting the 1%, because you can actually get a little bit more elsewhere, especially in here as well. So we go to 75 just for this, and this is the same thing we've used for the last year or so. The off-balance bonus, while it is off-balance, you do get an extra 10% of damage to all of your damage, and also don't forget that your heavy attacks do an additional 70% already when it's off balance. This is very, very important. Not to mention, of course, our heavies and all of our abilities we're using are damage over time. Everything we're using. So this does benefit us quite a lot. Ironclad, 23 points in here to give us 10% reduction to incoming direct damage. Direct damage as in what hits you in the face. Not all damage, just direct. So be very careful with that. You may want to change these out depending on the fight, but generally most things don't hit you in the face. Normally they hit the tank, but you want something. 75 points into Hardy to resist 14% of all physical, poison, and disease damage. Same again for Shock, Magic, Frost, and Flame. So this is a very, very good jump point to hit. 14% here. If you put any more points into here, you'll get no benefit whatsoever. 25 points to get to 100 will give you 1%. It's not worth it. 56 into Thick Skin to reduce dot damage by 20%. This also means that if you get hit by poison and reduce it here by 14%, and it's a damage over time, they do work together. It's very, very important. 11 points in a quick recovery for 2 reasons. 1, additional heal and receive, so we hit that jump point of 3%. 2, if you have 10 points in this tree, while rezzing someone, you take 15% less damage. You will be rezzing people. Little tip, get this passive here, put a shield on first, and then try rezzing someone. You will need to use that. 40 points into Warlord to reduce the cost of Break Free. You will be doing that quite a lot. 75 points into Tenacity and 75 points into Arcanist. Now, these are jump points as such. 14% here or 14% here. If you use 25 more points, it will give you 1 additional %, which is rubbish. I wouldn't waste the points in it. Otherwise, you start losing out on stuff like this. However, Tenacity does give you a tiny, tiny amount per 1 point after this. But if you add almost 20 points to this, you're going to gain back maybe 20 Magicka. It is tiny. Don't worry about it. Just keep it as it is. Now, 48 points into Tumbling. You will be dodge rolling a lot, especially if you go into Maelstrom and stuff like that. So you can put some points into here, or you can put more into Warlord. It's entirely up to you. And then I've got 2 points left over. 1% of something is better than 0% of nothing. So that's why I do that. Okay, so hopefully that helped. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. Hopefully that saves a few people, or a lot of you actually, a little bit of stress, because I know you thought with the off-balance changes that Easy Sorc was dead, but I can assure you it is not. I've been using this not just on this particular server. Obviously it's only been out a few days on this server, but I've been using it on the PC and stuff as well for the last 2 or 3 weeks, plus testing it for about 4 weeks as well, combined on PTS and live server. Even using a 300 CP version of this, it flattens everything. It's absolutely fine. And he's done the new DLC already. Not this particular character. I'm talking about the PC one that's much, much lower CPs. It's not a problem. So, for those of you that enjoy the Easy Sorc already and were a little bit worried, enjoy. For those of you that haven't tried it, get stuck in. You're going to love it. Anyway, let's wrap this up. First of all, if you're not subscribing, please hit that button. It is free. Furthermore, if you want to help support the channel outside of YouTube, there are some links in the description for Patreon, for Facebook, for Twitter, and of course the website, XynodeGaming.com. Once again, thank you all very, very much for watching. There'll be many more updates to the rest of the builds coming for this DLC, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.